A surprising case where a trial becomes entertainment for people all over the world. Today, we delve into a harrowing case that remains etched in the collective memory of Spain, showcasing the darker facets of human nature and judicial failings. Menacingly, he called out her name, freezing her in her tracks as she strained to discern the unfamiliar figure looming in the darkness. The figure rapidly closed in, seizing her. Her scream pierced the night, only to be silenced by a sharp pain that swept her off her feet, sending her crashing to the ground. The phenomenon of disappearances is alarmingly common in our unsettling world, where individuals vanish due to personal missteps or the sinister actions of others. Globally, there are countless mysterious and unresolved cases of missing persons. Data analysis reveals a troubling escalation in the number of disappearances over the last 2 decades. Today, we turn our focus to a case that stands as a stark emblem of injustice within the Spanish judicial system, a case from the Costa del Sol that continues to haunt the nation even decades later. This story unfolds with elements of love, disappearance, bloodshed, and a grievous injustice, a costly ordeal that would eventually see rectification, but leave a lasting imprint not only on the Spaniards but also on the world at large. Hilaria Alicia Hornos, born on December 2nd, 1952 in the pastoral province of Jaén within the municipality of Arroyo del Oyanco, Spain, is at the heart of this tale. By the age of 24, Alicia found herself deeply in love and married a Dutch national, Willem Wonnenkopf. The couple welcomed their first child, a son named Guillermo, followed by 2 daughters, Rosa and Rocio Wonnenkopf. As their family grew, so too did the tensions within their marriage. Willem's descent into alcoholism and subsequent job losses fueled frequent and heated arguments, during which he would often yell at and even strike Alicia. To support her family amidst growing strife, Alicia secured employment as a maid in a hotel in Ibiza. It was during this challenging period that she crossed paths with Dolores Vazquez, the hotel's director, who would later play a significant role in the unfolding events. Maria Dolores Vazquez was the daughter of immigrants from Galicia, Spain, who settled in the UK. She received a solid education and was known for her good manners and engaging conversation. A deep friendship blossomed between Dolores and Alicia, evolving into a romantic relationship. A year into their relationship, Alicia mustered the courage to leave her husband, Willem, and officially finalized their divorce. Willem returned to the Netherlands, allowing Alicia to move in with Dolores. The couple, now deeply in love, purchased a new house in Malaga. Following the divorce, Alicia was granted full custody of their 3 children, who she raised alongside Dolores. After their parents' separation in 1983, Rocio and her sister Rosa came to regard Dolores as a second mother, proudly adopting the surname Vazquez Hornos. The bond between Dolores and all 3 children was incredibly strong, fostering a household filled with love and mutual understanding. In 1988, despite the end of their romantic relationship, the women chose to continue living together as close friends. This arrangement lasted until 1994, when after 11 years together, they parted ways. Alicia then entered a new relationship with Juan Chirillo and moved into a different home, infusing her life with new love and vibrancy. However, the fairy tale darkened dramatically on the morning of October 10, 1999, when Alicia discovered her daughter Rocio was not at home. Initially unconcerned, Alicia assumed Rocio had stayed overnight at her boyfriend's or a friend's house. But as hours turned into days without her return, worry set in. The family reached out to Rocio's friends and boyfriend Antonio, hoping for any news that would explain her absence, but no one had seen her. On September 9th, Rocio had left home around 5:30 p.m., bidding farewell to her mother and older sister Rosa. She planned to attend a fair in Fuengirola with Antonio and other friends. Rocio had spent the evening at Antonio's nearby home in the La Cortiera neighborhood, leaving at around 10:30 p.m. to briefly return home to shower and change before rejoining her friends at the fair. A plan tragically interrupted. Alicia, already consumed with worry, decided to distract herself with a walk alongside Juan, choosing to delay reporting her daughter's disappearance to the police. As they strolled through the streets, Alicia's attention was drawn to a large bloodstain on the pavement. "It looks like some animal was hit here," she remarked to Juan. Initially dismissing it, their concern grew as they approached, and Alicia spotted sneakers speckled with blood. Sneakers she recognized as belonging to Rocio. "I moved closer, and there they were, Rocio's sneakers. I told him, 'Those are my daughter's sneakers,'" Alicia recalled. Juan was skeptical, but Alicia insisted, "No, I know her shoes. We need to call the police now." Her voice was tinged with hysteria as the reality of the situation set in. During their walk, they discovered not only the bloodied sneakers, but also a napkin and several bloodstains scattered across a vacant lot on Rosillo's usual route. That prompted Alicia to finally call the police and file a missing person report detailing Rosillo's appearance: long hair, brown eyes, dressed in a white Nike t-shirt and purple pants. The initial police investigation focused on the gruesome scene, where the forensic investigator emphasized the necessity of a thorough forensic examination to determine the origin of the blood on the road and Rosillo's sneakers. Initial theories proposed that an assault or fight had taken place, possibly leaving someone severely injured. As investigators continued to trace the bloodstains, they found more evidence suggesting violent actions: long trails that resembled drag marks, as if someone had been running, perhaps chased. Then, abruptly, the blood traces ended. However, nearby, the search team uncovered a significantly large blood stain indicating severe blood loss. The trail of bloody footprints and drag marks led to a set of car tire prints where, disturbingly, the blood traces vanished. Beside these tire marks, investigators found a cigarette butt of a brand rarely seen in Spain, adding another layer of mystery to the case. Forensic teams meticulously collected all potential evidence, hoping it would lead them to Rosillo. The DNA analysis from the samples found at the crime scene was crucial in piecing together the events of that night. A comprehensive investigation ensued, combining this data with the identification of the blood samples collected. As the search for Rosillo continued, the investigators grew increasingly convinced that Rosillo Waninkoff had been tragically murdered. The blood trail began on the sidewalk and led to a sizable pool of blood, large enough to suggest she could have died from significant blood loss. Nearby, drag marks intersected with tire tracks from a small car, identified as a model with tires discontinued in 1993. This detail, along with the drag marks extending across a steeply sloped area, suggested that at least two individuals were involved in moving the body, making it a challenging task for just one person. The body was believed to have been temporarily placed in a more secluded part of the vacant lot before a vehicle arrived to transport it away. The community rallied to find Rosillo, with volunteers searching on foot and by motorcycle across various terrains. Flyers bearing Rosillo's photo were ubiquitous, and her story was a constant presence in the media. The family worked closely with journalists, driven by the belief that keeping Rosillo's story alive in the public eye would prevent her from being forgotten. News crews were a constant fixture outside the Waninkoff home, all sharing the same hope of Rosillo's safe return. However, as time wore on, the search efforts remained fruitless. A few days after her disappearance, a local cab driver approached the police with a potentially crucial witness account. He reported that around 10 p.m. on the night Rosillo vanished, he narrowly avoided an SUV speeding on the wrong side of the road near where her sneakers were discovered. He also recalled hearing a chilling scream as he passed by the erratic vehicle. The grim reality set in when DNA tests confirmed that the blood found at the scene was indeed Rosillo. The news sent shockwaves of despair through her family and all who followed the case. The sorrow and shock were not confined to Rosillo's loved ones, but were felt across the whole of Spain. On November 2nd, 1999, 25 days after her disappearance, a grim discovery was made near the Los Altos del Rodeo Sports Club, located between Marbella and San Pedro de Alcántara. A disfigured body, likely Rosillo's, was found, casting a somber shadow over the community and marking a tragic turn in an already heart-wrenching saga. The body was discovered partially concealed by bushes and fallen leaves, hidden behind a hedge bordering a residential development close to the highway. It was situated on a narrow path, barely accessible by car, far from her home and found in another town, marking a grim end to the search that had focused near her residence. Upon their arrival at the scene, police were met with the gruesome sight of a severely decomposed body. Nearby, large black garbage bags were uncovered, one marked with the number 8, suggesting they were not originally purchased for this grim use, but were repurposed for transporting the body. The contents of these bags were particularly chilling. They contained clothes that were identified as belonging to Rosillo Waninkoff. Rosa, Rosillo's sister, recognized several items including rings and 2 t-shirts, the latter of which bore tears consistent with stab wounds. Notably, all clothing from the waist down was missing. The remnants were swiftly transported to a forensic lab for detailed analysis. 6 forensic experts dedicated an entire night to the task, painstakingly examining every detail of the degraded remains. Given the advanced state of decomposition, accelerated by the humid conditions typical of rain and heat, No organs remained intact. Only the bones could be fully examined. Their investigation revealed multiple close wounds and precisely 8 stab wounds on the back, inflicted with a single-sided blade. The brutality and rapidity of the attack suggested that the victim had either been immobilized or unable to react in time to defend herself. Additionally, fingerprints were lifted from the plastic bags found at the scene, adding to the collection of evidence that already included tire prints from a vehicle involved. Forensic analysis also recovered 2 critical tissue samples from Rosillo's body, providing potential leads in the ongoing investigation. These developments hinted at a violently orchestrated crime, with every clue pieced together inching closer to solving the harrowing mystery of Rosillo Waninkoff's tragic demise. At this stage of the investigation, the evidence available was insufficient to justify the arrest of any particular suspect. However, the Civil Guard did have some leads and data that they were actively exploring. Despite intense public pressure demanding a quick resolution, the investigators were unable to pinpoint a suspect directly linked to the crime. The condition of Rosillo's decomposed body complicated the investigation significantly. It was impossible to determine key details such as whether she had been sexually assaulted. When investigators observed the positioning of the body, with its legs unnaturally spread apart, they hypothesized that the scene might have been staged by the perpetrator to simulate an act of violence, leading them to dismiss the theory of sexual assault as the primary motive. Instead, they considered that the crime was driven by feelings of revenge or hatred, indicating that the attacker might have been someone close to Rosillo, possibly harboring intense anger towards her. The investigation team conducted follow-up interviews to gather more insights. They first questioned Rosillo's boyfriend, Antonio Gerada, who was the last person known to have seen her alive and was supposed to meet her again on the night she disappeared. However, Antonio provided an alibi, claiming he had fallen asleep at home and had not attended the fair as planned. Questioning extended to all of Rosillo's relatives and friends, but each of them also had solid alibis. A year after Rosillo Waninkoff's tragic death, the Civil Guard managed to narrow the list of suspects considerably. By year's end, their investigation pointed them towards a suspect who seemed increasingly likely to be involved: Dolores Vazquez. Despite the lack of concrete evidence against her, the media frenzy around the case led many to believe in Dolores' guilt. Dolores Vazquez, a close friend and former romantic partner of Alicia, found herself at the center of media-driven accusations. Reports suggested that Alicia had accused Dolores from the outset, although their romantic relationship had ended 4 years prior to the crime. As the investigation unfolded, it focused intensely on Dolores, fueled by speculative theories about potential motive. It was suggested that Rosillo might have been seen as an obstacle to the past relationship between Dolores and Alicia, framing the crime as one driven by unresolved emotional conflicts between the two women. This angle dominated the investigation despite the shaky grounds on which it was based, illustrating how public and media pressure can steer the direction of a case. The rumor mill spun tales of revenge, suggesting that if Rosillo had not been in the picture, Alicia might have reconciled with Dolores Vazquez. This narrative painted Dolores as seeking vengeance against Alicia for not returning to her. From the moment of her arrest, the press and public viewed Dolores as guilty despite her consistent denials and lack of confession. The community's conviction of her guilt was bolstered by police suspicion that the killer was someone close to the victim. Family members described Dolores as aggressive, violent, and excessively jealous. Alicia portrayed her to the media as vindictive and cruel, fueling public condemnation. During the trial, Dolores' non-traditional persona was highlighted and criticized, a deviation from typical societal norms in Spain. The media crafted an image of her as sarcastic, aggressive, calculating, and cold-blooded, a villain who meticulously planned a crime out of hatred after waiting for 4 years. The trial became a spectacle, with people attending not out of concern for justice, but as a form of entertainment. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, eager to witness the proceedings and not miss a moment of what had become a highly publicized event. Journalists constantly reported on the trial, emphasizing that a close family friend was charged with Rosillo Waninkoff's murder. Dolores Vazquez, portrayed as unlikable and unfriendly, faced an uphill battle in court. However, being unsociable and reserved does not equate to criminality, a fact often overlooked in the court of public opinion. The trial was influenced not only by the evidence presented, but also by the media and public speculation, which pervaded the streets and infiltrated the courtroom. Ultimately, the repeated falsehoods broadcasted by the media shaped public perception, turning unsubstantiated accusations into a widely accepted truth about Dolores. The lack of concrete evidence against her mattered little in the face of a justice system swayed by public sentiment and media bias. Dolores Vazquez became the scapegoat chosen to satisfy the community's demand for justice, regardless of the actual facts. Her dubious alibi and perceived character flaws made her an easy target in a case that was as much about satisfying societal expectations as it was about finding the true perpetrator. Dolores Vazquez was never seen at the crime scene. The tire tracks found did not match the car she drove, the fabric fibers recovered were not from her clothing, and the fingerprints on the trash bags did not belong to her. Despite these discrepancies, she was implicated. Dolores had an alibi. She claimed to have been caring for her ill mother and watching her niece that day. Nevertheless, this alibi was largely ignored during the trial. In court, more than 50 witnesses were called to testify against her. Dolores took the stand only once, passionately declaring her innocence. "I didn't kill Rocio. I didn't even see her that day," she stated. She implored everyone, including all of Spain, to seek the real perpetrator, suggesting that the true criminal might still be among them, possibly even in the courtroom. She maintained that there had never been any concrete evidence against her and asserted her innocence. Dolores criticized the Spanish judicial system, accusing it of often overstepping legal boundaries. She argued that Spanish prosecutors and investigating judges were willing to bend the law to prove their theories, showing an absolute disregard for justice. Despite the lack of physical evidence linking her to the crime, the Civil Guard's report leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence and a psychological profile that painted Dolores as a likely suspect. The jury, influenced by the profile and the prevailing public sentiment, found Dolores Vazquez guilty of murder, sentencing her to 16 years in prison. The verdict was met with public approval, and many felt justice had been served. Meanwhile, Rocio's funeral attracted extensive media attention, with journalists filming continuously, often to the dismay of mourners. This period was marked by a pervasive fear within the community, fueled by sensationalist television coverage that delved into every aspect of the case. Following Dolores' arrest, Rocio's family appeared on various TV shows, reiterating stories of Vazquez's supposedly cold and cruel nature. Years later, a strikingly similar crime shattered the narrative built around Dolores' guilt. On the morning of August 15, 2003, the disappearance of 17-year-old Sonia Carabantes was reported. Her friends last saw her at the doorstep of her home, but she never made it inside. Just a few doors down, under a tree, her parents discovered her shoes, purse, and phone, with traces of blood on nearby parked cars. The eerie similarities to Rocio's case raised alarming questions, especially since Dolores had been incarcerated for nearly a year and a half by then. The community was forced to confront the possibility that the police might have imprisoned an innocent person and the real criminal was still at large. Authorities immediately sprang into action to investigate Sonia Carabantes' disappearance, focusing particularly on a car headlight found at the scene, one of the main pieces of evidence. Civil Guard officers contacted local car repair shops, looking for a vehicle with a damaged headlight that fit the description. The investigation also considered various theories, including the possibility of rape and other violent crimes, noting that both Rocio and Sonia had disappeared during local fairs. The community rallied behind the search efforts for Sonia, just as they had for Rocio. Flyers featuring Sonia's image were widely distributed, and the fair employees in both Matril and Coin were thoroughly vetted. The public's involvement was intense, with many volunteering their time and resources to aid the police. Despite these extensive efforts, the situation took a grim turn. 5 days after her disappearance, Sonia's body was discovered in a creek under a pile of rocks near Coin, severely hampering the investigation due to heavy rainfall the night before, which washed away potential clues. On the day she vanished, Sonia had been enjoying the fair in Coin and had parted ways with her friends near her home shortly before she was brutally attacked. The assailant struck her multiple times, rendering her partially unconscious and unable to resist the sudden violent onslaught. She was then abducted in a car to a secluded location. Sonia suffered both internal and external injuries before she was ultimately strangled to death. Fortunately, her body was found quickly enough to allow for comprehensive forensic analysis. Colonel Pacagabella of the Civil Guard later announced that critical evidence had been retrieved from Sonia's body. The biological material collected during the autopsy was analyzed and entered into the police criminal DNA database. In a pivotal development, this genetic material matched DNA found on a cigarette butt at Rocio Wanenkoff's crime scene. This crucial link suggested a connection between the two cases, prompting a reevaluation of the evidence as the comparison of the DNA samples unfolded. The revelation was startling. The DNA from the English brand cigarette butt and the skin particles found under the victim's fingernails were identical and belonged to the same person who had killed Rocio in 1999 and attacked Sonia. This discovery conclusively proved that Dolores Vazquez, who had been unjustly vilified by all of Spain, was innocent, while the true perpetrator had remained free, only to claim another young girl's life. The breakthrough came when Cecilia Pantoja, after noticing bloodstains on her ex-husband's t-shirt just days after Sonia's body was discovered, approached the police. She also recalled that her husband had been absent from home on the day of Rocio's attack. With the aid of DNA testing and Cecilia's testimony, authorities were able to identify the real killer of Rocio and Sonia, Tony King, known in Britain as the Holloway Strangler. Tony Alexander King's criminal history began in his teenage years in the Holloway neighborhood of North London. In 1985, he was responsible for a series of violent attacks on women, during which he strangled and abused his victims. At that time, he was known by his birth name, Anthony Bromwich. Arrested and convicted at the age of 19, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison but was released on parole after serving just 5, only to be incarcerated again weeks later for another violent offense. Seeking a fresh start, he changed his name to Tony King, married Cecilia Pantoja, and attempted to establish a normal family life, which included having a daughter. However, King soon reverted to his criminal behaviors. Once the Spanish police pieced together his involvement in the recent crimes, they placed him under 24-hour surveillance. A month after Sonia's death, King was arrested. During the police interrogation, he confessed to the murders of both girls. He recounted how he had followed Rocio one evening as she was walking home from her boyfriend's house, ambushed her with a razor held to her neck, and inadvertently stabbed her when she struggled to escape. This confession helped clear Dolores Vazquez's name and finally brought justice to the families of the young victims, though tragically too late for those who had already suffered. In a tragic turn of events, Tony King, overwhelmed by panic, stabbed Rocio 9 times. In 2005, he was sentenced to 36 years in prison for the kidnapping, violence, and murder of Sonia Carabantes, and was ordered to pay the victim's family approximately 350,000 euros in compensation. Additionally, he received a 7-year sentence for an attempted assault on a woman in Malaga in 2001. The following year, King was also found guilty of Rocio Wanenkoff's murder, receiving an added 19-year sentence. Prior to his trials, he penned letters to the mothers of Sonia and Rocio, seeking forgiveness for his heinous acts. He is now serving his sentences at the Herrera de la Mancha Maximum Security Prison in Ciudad Real, Spain. The wrongful conviction of Dolores Vazquez in Rocio's case ignited a major scandal in Spain, highlighting the grave injustices within the judicial system. Common expectations that such miscarriages of justice should lead to shame and financial repercussions for the state were unmet. Instead, the episode revealed a harsh reality where not only can the police and courts wrongfully punish an innocent person, but society at large can relentlessly vilify them. It took over a year for it to become evident that Dolores had been truthful in her consistent declarations of innocence. The traits that had been misinterpreted as cruelty and insensitivity were simply aspects of her personality. In 2008, the Spanish Ministry of Justice offered Dolores 120,000 euros as compensation, a sum far less than the 4 million euros she had initially sought. Notably, no formal apology was ever extended to her. After her release, Dolores, whose family originally moved to Spain from Epsom, UK, returned to the United Kingdom. Despite the passage of more than 20 years since the ordeal began, she has yet to receive an apology or adequate compensation for the injustices she suffered. In 2014, Dolores was working for a transport company in East London and underwent a psychological evaluation to assess the long-term impacts of her harrowing experience. Dolores Vazquez recently expressed her continued wait for an apology, highlighting the enduring impact of her ordeal. She described years of anxiety that made it difficult for her to interact with people and secure employment, a direct result of the fear and humiliation she endured. The case of Dolores Vazquez is now regarded as one of the most significant miscarriages of justice in Spain's judicial history since 1910. This case underscores a troubling reality. Criminals can often evade capture simply by crossing national borders, even if they leave clear evidence like DNA behind. The police sometimes rush to solve cases by pinning them on convenient suspects without thorough investigation. Meanwhile, the media exacerbates the situation by sensationalizing scandals and delving into the private lives of all involved, not just the perpetrators, but also the victims. Society, too, plays a role in these injustices, often hastily labeling individuals and deeming it acceptable to imprison someone based merely on dislike or prejudice. It's a lamentable truth that this scenario is not unique to Spain, but is a common occurrence worldwide. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking stories and deep dives into the world's most unsettling and intriguing cases.